The massive salvage ship Star Seeker drifted silently through the debris field, its powerful scanners sweeping through the ancient battlefield. Captain Reed stood on the bridge, his scaled hands folded behind his back as he watched his crew work. The emergency beacon that had drawn them to this sector had been broadcasting for what their experts estimated to be over 300 years. "Captain, we found something interesting," called out First Officer Martin from his station. His antenna twitched with excitement as he studied the readings. "It's big. Military-grade hull plating. Definitely an old human warship." Reed's expression changed from boredom to amusement. Human technology was considered primitive by modern standards. Their ships were bulky, overbuilt, and relied on what most spacefaring races now considered outdated weapon systems. Still, salvage was salvage, and human materials were known for their durability if nothing else. "Bring us closer," Reed ordered. "Let's see what we've got." The Star Seeker's floodlights illuminated the massive dark shape floating in space. The warship was huge, easily twice the size of their salvage vessel. Its hull was scarred from ancient battles, but the basic structure remained intact. Faded letters on the side spelled out HFY Defender in the human alphabet. "Look at the size of those railgun turrets," laughed one of the junior officers. "They actually used physical projectiles. How quaint." Reed smiled at the comment. Modern ships used plasma weapons and energy beams. The idea of shooting metal slugs through space seemed absurdly primitive. "Scan for any active systems," he ordered. "Let's make sure this relic is completely dead before we start cutting it up." The scans revealed something unexpected. Deep within the ship's armored core, there was a faint power signature. The ship's quantum AI core was still functioning, though in a dormant state. This was surprising. Human AI systems were considered basic compared to modern ones, but this one had somehow survived centuries of drift. "Should we try to access it?" Martin asked, his antenna now twitching with concern. Human military AI can be unpredictable. Reed waved away his concerns. "It's probably just running basic maintenance protocols." These old human AIs were barely more than advanced autopilots. "Begin attaching the tow cables. We'll drag it back to Station 7 and strip it for materials." As the salvage crew worked, none of them noticed the subtle changes in the power readings. Deep within the warship's core, ancient systems began a slow boot sequence. The dormant AI registered the presence of the salvage ship, but remained passive, gathering data. The crew attached massive tow cables to the Defender's hull, joking among themselves about human engineering. They found the thick armor lockably excessive, the weapon systems hilariously outdated, and the entire design philosophy amusingly primitive. "Did you see the size of their reactor housing?" one engineer reported over the comm. "They used actual physical shielding instead of energy fields. Must have added tons of unnecessary weight." "Well, humans always did like to over-engineer everything," Reed replied. "That's why their empire fell behind. They never could keep up with modern innovations." With the cables secured, the Star Seeker began its slow journey back to Station 7. The massive human warship followed obediently behind, its dark hull occasionally catching the light of distant stars. To the salvage crew, it was nothing more than an interesting piece of history, soon to be cut up and recycled into something more useful. They had no way of knowing that the primitive AI was actually analyzing every detail of their ship, their conversations, and their technology. They couldn't have guessed that the thick armor they mocked housed weapon systems far more advanced than they could imagine. And they certainly didn't realize that the outdated reactor housing contained fail-safes and backup systems that had kept the ship alive for centuries, waiting for the right moment to awaken. The Star Seeker's crew continued their journey, laughing at their primitive find, completely unaware that they had just salvaged one of the most sophisticated warships ever built by human hands. The Defender remained silent, its AI gathering data, assessing potential threats, and waiting for the moment when its true capabilities would be needed. Soon, They would all learn why human warships were built to last. Station 7 hung in space like a giant metal star, its rotating rings casting long shadows across the docking bay where the Star Seeker had just finished securing its ancient prize. The human warship Defender looked even more massive next to the station's modern architecture, its dark hull standing out against the gleaming metal of the docks. Captain Reed was in the station commander's office, discussing the salvage rights with Commander Williams, a tall, gray-skinned official who had overseen Station 7 for the past decade. "It's quite a find," Williams admitted, studying the scans of the human vessel. "The materials alone are worth." A loud alarm cut through their conversation. Red lights began flashing across the station's command center. "Report." Williams barked into his comm unit. "Multiple ships just dropped out of hyperspace," the sensor officer responded, his voice tense. "No identification signals. They're running dark. Wait." Energy signatures matched the raiders from the outer rim. Reed's scales paled. The raiders were notorious, a fleet of pirates and outcasts who had been terrorizing the sector for months. They attacked stations, stripped them of resources, and disappeared before help could arrive. "How many ships?" Williams demanded. 23 vessels, Commander, including 3 heavy cruisers. The station's defense coordinator rushed into the office. "Sir, our combat ships are out on patrol. We only have the station's fixed defenses and 2 patrol boats. We can't hold against a force that size." Williams studied the tactical display, his expression grim. Station 7's defenses were designed to handle small raiding parties, not an entire fleet. The raiders must have learned about the station's patrol schedule. "Send out a distress signal," he ordered, "and begin evacuation procedures for non-essential personnel." The first shots were fired 10 minutes later. The raiders' cruisers launched a barrage of plasma fire, testing the station's shields. The patrol boats moved to intercept, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. Reed watched from the command center, feeling useless. His salvage ship had minimal weapons. It wasn't designed for combat. Then his eyes fell on the massive form of the Defender, still secured in the docking bay. "Commander," he said slowly, "what if we used the human ship as a shield? Its hull is incredibly thick. We could position it to protect the station's weak points." Williams was about to respond when one of the technicians interrupted. "Sir, I'm picking up power readings from the human vessel. Its systems are activating." On the main screen, they watched in astonishment as lights began flickering to life across the Defender's hull. The massive rail gun turrets that they had mocked earlier began to move, their ancient mechanisms as smooth as the day they were built. "That's impossible," Reed whispered. "The AI was dormant. We checked." A new voice crackled over the station's comm system. It was deep, clear, and distinctly artificial. "This is Guardian, Combat Eye of the HS Defender. I have assessed the tactical situation and determined a Level 1 threat to civilian infrastructure, initiating defense protocols." The command center fell silent as they watched the huge warship begin to move under its own power. The docking clamps released automatically, and the vessel that they had dismissed as a relic oriented itself toward the incoming raiders. "Stations, be advised," Guardian announced. "This vessel's weapons systems are armed and operational. Please adjust your shields to frequency 793 to avoid interference from sonic disruption waves." "Sonic what?" the defense coordinator asked, but Williams was already ordering the shield adjustments. The raiders had noticed the activity. 2 of their smaller ships broke formation and headed toward the Defender, likely seeing it as an easy target. Human vessels were known to be primitive. The raider commander's voice came over an open channel, thick with amusement. "Do you really think that ancient heap can stand against modern ships?" Guardian's response was simple. "Allow me to demonstrate." The rail guns that had been mocked as obsolete began to spin up. The sound vibrated through the station's hull, a deep mechanical roar that seemed to shake the very fabric of space. The raiders were about to learn an important lesson about underestimating human military technology. The only question was, How many of them would survive to tell about it? The first shots from the Defender's rail guns crossed the space between ships in less than a second. There was no bright flash of plasma, no colorful energy beam, just the silent flight of tungsten rounds moving at a significant fraction of light speed. The raiders didn't even have time to adjust their shields. The rounds punched through the first attacking ship like paper, sending it spinning off course in a spray of debris and venting atmosphere. The second ship tried to evade, but Guardian's targeting systems had already calculated its escape route. A second burst caught it in the engine section, turning its reactor into a brief bright star. In the station's command center, Engineer Tom Parker watched the battle with professional fascination. He had spent years studying various weapon systems, but he had never seen anything like this. "Commander Williams," Guardian's voice came through clearly. "Your station's defensive grid would be more effective if synchronized with my targeting data. I can provide real-time calculations for optimal firing solutions." Williams looked at Parker. "Can we do that? Interface with its systems?" "We can try," Parker said, already moving to a console. "But human AIs were supposed to be." He stopped mid-sentence as his screen filled with incredibly complex targeting algorithms. "This is impossible. These calculations are more advanced than anything we have." Guardian seemed to hear him. "Human military technology followed a different development path than yours. We prioritized reliability and raw computational power over the neural networks you prefer. Less elegant, perhaps, but extremely effective in combat situations." As if to prove the point, the Defender's point defense system activated. Hundreds of small turrets emerged from what had appeared to be solid hull plating. They tracked and destroyed incoming missiles with mechanical precision, creating a barrier of intercepting fire that nothing could penetrate. "Their main fleet is moving in," the sensor officer reported. "All ships on attack vector." The raiders had apparently decided to eliminate this unexpected threat quickly. 15 ships moved in formation, their weapons charging for a concentrated strike. "Multiple targeting solutions detected," Guardian announced calmly, initiating primary defense screen and preparing main battery response. Everyone expected the Defender to raise energy shields like modern ships. Instead, sections of its hull began to rotate and shift. Layers of some strange dark material extended outward, creating an overlapping pattern of physical armor plates. "What kind of shielding is that?" Reed asked, his professional curiosity overcoming his fear. "Metamaterial composite armor," Guardian explained, "designed to absorb, deflect, and redirect energy weapons while maintaining structural integrity against kinetic impacts. Your plasma weapons will find it problematic." The raiders opened fire. A storm of plasma bolts and energy beams struck the Defender's strange armor. Instead of dissipating against shields, the energy seemed to crawl across the surface of the armor plates, following patterns etched into the material itself. The plates glowed brighter and brighter, but held firm. "Energy recycling at 60% efficiency," Guardian reported. "Sufficient charge accumulated for demonstration of primary weapon systems." The Defender's hull split open along previously invisible seams. What emerged made Parker gasp in recognition. Those are actual nuclear missiles. They still have active warheads." "Correct," Guardian confirmed. "Mark 7 tactical nuclear deterrent packages, upgraded with modern propulsion systems during my last refit. Would you like to observe their effectiveness against modern shield systems?" Before anyone could respond, the Defender launched its weapons. The missiles streaked toward the raider fleet, their paths seemingly random, but actually following a complex dance of trajectories calculated by Guardian's combat computer. The raiders' shields flared bright against the nuclear detonations, but they were designed to defend against energy weapons and kinetic impacts, not the complex mix of radiation, electromagnetic pulse, and raw explosive force the human engineers had spent centuries perfecting. 3 raider ships simply disappeared in the atomic fireballs. 4 more spun out of control, their systems overloaded by the EMPs. The rest scattered, their tight formation broken by the unexpected power of the primitive weapons. In the command center, Williams watched with a mix of awe and fear. "I think," he said slowly, "we need to reconsider our definition of advanced technology." Guardian's response carried a hint of what might have been pride. "That would be wise. Commander, shall we proceed with the full combat demonstration?" The Raider fleet regrouped at a safe distance, their formation much looser now. The burning wreckage of their destroyed ships drifted in space, a stark warning of what human engineering could do. From the station's command center, Parker watched the tactical display with growing excitement. "Look at how the Defender moves," he said, pointing to the screen. "No wasted energy. Every motion has a purpose." The ancient warship was indeed moving with deadly grace, its massive bulk belying its maneuverability. Guardian had positioned the ship to cover the station's most vulnerable sectors while maintaining optimal firing angles for its weapons. "Hostile fleet is reorganizing," Guardian announced. "They are adapting their shield frequencies. The nuclear option will be less effective now." The Raider commander's voice crackled over the comm again, but this time without any mockery. "What kind of abomination are you? No human AI could fight like this." "Your assessment of human capabilities is flawed," Guardian replied calmly. "Allow me to demonstrate our close-range combat systems." The Defender suddenly accelerated toward the enemy fleet. Its movement was so quick that several officers gasped. The Raiders scattered, but Guardian had anticipated their escape vectors. The railgun spoke again, this time firing what appeared to be nets of glowing energy. "Quantum entanglement webs," Parker breathed, recognizing the technology from old technical journals. They actually built them. The energy nets expanded as they flew, catching two Raider ships. The exotic particles in the webs disrupted their engines, leaving them dead in space. But Guardian wasn't finished. The Defender's hull opened again, revealing rows of what looked like simple metal tubes. "Warning," Guardian broadcast on all frequencies. "Deploying Mark III combat drones. Suggestion: surrender now." Hundreds of small objects launched from the tubes. They looked primitive, just metal spheres with basic thrusters. The Raiders actually laughed, their sensors showing no energy weapons or sophisticated systems. Their laughter died when the drones reached their ships. The spheres split open, revealing spinning disks of molecularly sharpened metal. They latched onto the Raiders' hulls and began cutting through with terrifying speed, ignoring shields completely. No energy weapons, no complex systems to block or disrupt. Just simple, brutal, mechanical efficiency. "Sometimes," Guardian commented, "the old ways are best." A new alarm sounded in the command center. The three Raider heavy cruisers were moving forward, their massive weapons charging. "Energy spike detected," the sensor officer called out. "They're going to fire their main guns." Williams turned to the tactical display, fear evident in his eyes. Those weapons could crack a planet's crust. The station's shields wouldn't stand a chance. But Guardian had seen this too. The Defender's strange armor plates shifted again, forming a concave dish aimed at the cruisers. The surface began to ripple like liquid metal. "Activating wave motion redirector," Guardian announced. "Station 7, please reinforce your aft shields. There may be some bleed-through." The cruisers fired, 3 beams of pure energy, each powerful enough to vaporize a small moon, struck the Defender's transformed hull. For a moment, the ancient warship seemed to glow from within. The armor plates pulsed with stored power, patterns of light racing across their surface. Then Guardian fired back. The stored energy returned to the cruisers, magnified and focused by the Defender's hull. The blast caught all 3 ships at once, overwhelming their shields and turning their own power against them. When the light faded, the cruisers were drifting, their hulls cracked and systems fried. "By the stars," Reed whispered, his scales pale with shock. "What else can that ship do?" "Would you like a complete list?" Guardian asked, and for the first time, there was definitely amusement in its voice. We've only begun to explore my combat options. Perhaps the raiders would like to see what happens when I bring my secondary weapons online. The remaining raider ships were already turning to flee. They had come expecting an easy target. Instead, they had awakened something from humanity's past, something that remembered when humans were the most feared military force in known space, and Guardian was just getting started. The remaining raiders regrouped around their last heavy cruiser, the ship's captain now in command of their diminished fleet. 8 ships remained from their original 23, and none of them had escaped damage. They formed a defensive circle, shields overlapping in a technique that had proven effective against modern weapons. Their formation is actually quite good, Guardian commented to the station's command center. Unfortunately for them, humans wrote the book on breaking shield walls. Engineer Parker had been studying the Defender schematics, which Guardian was now sharing freely with the station. "These readings can't be right," he said, looking up at Commander Williams. "According to this, the ship's reactor is barely at 20% power." "Correct," Guardian replied. "I try not to waste energy unnecessarily." The raiders made their move. Their ships launched salvos of autonomous hunter-killer drones, thousands of them, creating a swarm of deadly machines that filled space between them and the Defender. Each drone carried enough explosives to cripple a modern warship. "Fascinating approach," Guardian noted. "They believe overwhelming numbers will compensate for technological disadvantage." Humans explored that strategy extensively during the machine wars. The Defender's hull began to emit a soft, pulsing blue light. Where the light touched the hunter-killer drones, they simply stopped working. No explosions, no dramatic effects. They just died, turning into lifeless chunks of metal that drifted harmlessly past. "What was that?" Reed asked, his professional curiosity getting the better of him again. "Targeted electromagnetic pulse field," Guardian explained. "The original design was meant to disable human-made drones, but the principle works on any electronic system within certain parameters. Would you like to see what it does to larger ships?" The blue pulse expanded, washing over the raider fleet. Shield generators flickered and failed. Weapon systems went dark. Even life support systems struggled to function. The raiders' elegant modern technology proved helplessly vulnerable to this primitive human weapon. But the raiders weren't finished. The lead cruiser launched a last, desperate weapon. A black hole bomb, designed to create a temporary gravity, well strong enough to crush anything caught in its radius. "Gravity weapon detected," Guardian announced. "Most interesting." Activating inertial nullifiers. The black hole bomb detonated between the fleets. Space itself seemed to bend and twist as the artificial gravity well formed. The raiders watched in satisfaction, expecting to see the human relic torn apart by gravitational forces. Instead, the Defender simply ignored the gravity well. It moved through the distorted space as if it wasn't there, its hull glowing with strange patterns of light. Humans developed gravity manipulation technology long ago, Guardian explained to the astonished observers. "We needed it to build our first faster-than-light drives. This ship's inertial control systems were designed to handle forces far greater than this." The Defender emerged from the gravity well directly in front of the raider fleet. Its hull opened one final time, revealing what looked like a simple glass sphere filled with swirling lights. "What is that?" Williams asked, noticing how Guardian had positioned the ship to place the station safely behind it. "This," Guardian said, "is an example of why humans stopped using it, initiating quantum cascade reaction." The sphere released a wave of pure white energy that expanded in a perfect circle. Where it touched the raiders' ships, reality itself seemed to hiccup. Metal folded in impossible ways. Energy shields didn't just fail. They ceased to exist as if they had never been there at all. When the wave passed, the raider fleet was changed. Their ships still existed, but they were different, simplified, reduced to their most basic forms. All their advanced technology had been stripped away, leaving only hull metal and basic life support. "Quantum state reset," Guardian explained. It reduces matter and energy to their base configuration. Extremely effective, but banned under 17 different peace treaties. Since this is a defensive action against pirates, however, those treaties do not apply. The raiders, their ships now little more than metal shells floating in space, had no choice but to surrender. They had learned the hard way why humans have been both respected and feared throughout the galaxy. In the command center, Parker finally asked the question everyone was thinking. Guardian, if this is what human ships could do, why aren't humans still the dominant force in space? Guardian's response was simple but heavy with meaning. Because humans learned that just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Sometimes, the greatest power is in choosing not to use it. In the days following the battle, Station 7 became a hub of activity. Ships from neighboring systems came to see the ancient human warship that had single-handedly defeated a raider fleet. The Defender remained stationed protectively near the docking bay, its dark hull now a source of comfort rather than mockery. Commander Williams stood in his office, looking out at the Defender through the viewport. Captain Reed and Engineer Parker were with him, along with several high-ranking military officials who had rushed to the station after hearing the news. The raiders have all been secured, Williams reported to the gathering. Their ships were towed to a military facility for study. Though I doubt they'll learn much. Guardian's quantum cascade weapon left them with barely enough technology to maintain life support. Speaking of Guardian, one of the military officials, Admiral Jones, turned to the room's main display where Guardian's interface was active. We need to discuss your status, a warship of your capabilities. There are concerns. Understandable, Guardian replied, its voice as calm as ever. However, my primary directives remain unchanged. I am a defensive weapons system, designed to protect human interests and their allies. Station 7 is now under my protection. Parker, who had spent the last few days studying the Defender systems with Guardian's permission, spoke up. What I don't understand is why you let us salvage you in the first place. You could have prevented it. Correct, Guardian acknowledged. But that would have violated my core programming. Humans designed me to be a guardian, not a conqueror. I observed, I learned, and I acted only when lives were in danger. Reed's scales flushed with embarrassment as he remembered his earlier mockery of human technology. We were so wrong about human engineering. We thought we had surpassed it, but we only took a different path. A common misconception, Guardian said. Humans developed many paths of technology that other races considered impossible or impractical. The metamaterial armor you saw, it was designed to function without power, using purely physical properties to defeat energy weapons. The railguns, they were refined to near perfection because humans refused to rely solely on energy-based weapons that could be blocked by shields. Admiral Jones leaned forward, his interest clearly piqued. But why did humans abandon these technologies? With weapons like yours, they could have dominated space. They didn't abandon them, Guardian corrected. They sealed them away. My last orders, received 300 years ago, were to protect these technologies until they were truly needed. Humans realized that some advances were too dangerous to share, too tempting to use. They chose to step back from their military dominance and allow other races to develop their own paths. The room fell silent as they considered this. Finally, Williams asked the question that had been bothering him. So why reveal everything now? Because you were ready, Guardian replied. The raiders would have destroyed this station, killed its inhabitants, and continued their campaign of destruction. By revealing these technologies in defense of innocent lives, I fulfilled my primary directive, while demonstrating why such power must be used responsibly. Parker had been working on a data pad, reviewing the technical data Guardian had shared. Some of these principles could be adapted to improve our current technology. Not the weapons, but the defensive systems, the medical facilities, the life support improvements. Correct again, Guardian said. That is why I am sharing selective technical data. Humans developed far more than weapons. Their medical stasis fields, their atmospheric processors, their gravity manipulation systems, all of these can benefit people without risking military escalation. The Defender's hull gleamed in the starlight as a cargo ship passed nearby. The civilian vessel's crew could be seen at their viewports, staring in awe at the ancient warship. Where once they might have seen an obsolete relic, they now saw a guardian, a protector. There will be other threats, Admiral Jones warned. The raiders were just the beginning. Other powers might come, seeking to claim or destroy this technology. Let them come, Guardian replied, and for the first time, there was steel in its artificial voice. This station is under my protection now. The humans who built me knew that peace must sometimes be defended. I will honor their wisdom by using their legacy as they intended, not to conquer, but to protect. Williams looked around his office at the assembled officials, then back at the Defender floating majestically outside. I think, he said slowly, this is the beginning of a new era, not one of human dominance, but of human wisdom guiding us forward. That, Guardian agreed, was always the plan. Over the next few weeks, Station 7 was transformed. Under Guardian's guidance, its defensive systems were upgraded with simplified versions of human technology. The medical bay received new equipment that cut healing times in half. Even the environmental systems were improved, making the station more efficient and comfortable. The Defender remained, a silent sentinel watching over the station. Its presence alone deterred pirates and raiders from the entire sector. But more importantly, it served as a reminder that true advancement came not from the power to destroy, but from the wisdom to know when not to. Captain Reed's salvage ship, the Star Seeker, was the first to receive some of the civilian technology improvements. As he prepared to depart on his next mission, he looked back at the Defender, now proudly bearing both its human markings and Station 7's insignia. You know, he said to Parker, who had come to see him off, when we first found that ship, I thought we were salvaging a piece of history. Instead, history found us. Parker nodded, clutching his data pad filled with notes from his ongoing studies of human engineering. Guardian told me something interesting yesterday. It said that humans had a saying. The best technology doesn't just solve problems, it prevents them. As the Star Seeker departed, its sensors picked up the Defender conducting another patrol. The ancient warship moved with the same deadly grace as before, but now everyone understood. It wasn't just a warship. It was a testament to human ingenuity, a guardian of peace, and a reminder that sometimes the most advanced civilization isn't the one with the most powerful weapons, but the one wise enough to know when not to use them. The legacy of human engineering lived on, not in conquest or destruction, but in protection and progress. And somewhere, perhaps, the humans who built Guardian were smiling, knowing their creation had fulfilled its purpose exactly as they had intended. The end.